Adam Terry is our guest, and man, Adam, I wanted to talk to you about the spring football game, and we will do that. But a guy we saw in the spring football game has found himself in the portal already. What do you make of the Trevor Pena news today? That one kind of caught us out of the clear blue sky this morning.
Yeah, I mean that's one tragic, right? Like that's a guy that has a heavy hand in the locker room as a captain, has a tremendous upside going into the senior season. So I think as far as that goes, that's tough. But the adage when I was in the NFL, you can only coach who you have. That is kind of the same thing that's occurring in college football, right? So if he's there, you can coach him. If he's out the door, what can you do, right? Like, I don't think that a situation like this is one that anybody's excited about except for Trevor, right? Like, on the open market, he's probably going to get a little bit more NIL money and have that type of success. But the thing that a lot of these kids are failing to realize is how do you plug within the system, right? You're with a guy like Jeff Nixon. He's going to find your strengths. He's going to find your weaknesses and exploit your strengths. When you're in that open market, there's a lot of glitz and glamour and a lot of fast talking. It doesn't necessarily put you in the best position to make that transition to the next level. And historically, that next level is the NFL. But right now, you're looking at that next level being a bigger NIL deal. So it catches you off guard. And I think from Syracuse's perspective, you wish them the best of luck. But, that's a leader that you're now missing in that locker room. And, you move on.
There's so many different angles to hit it from, right? What we can get into, Syracuse has a bunch of other wide receivers. Like, my guess is they'll be okay when it comes to the football side of things. But, I go back to December. Like, it was a big announcement, right? When Fran said out loud, hey, this guy's coming back. He's a captain. Obviously, this is a new world, right? Spring transfer portal, NIL. Like, does it rub you wrong, or is this just the world we live in right now?
It doesn't rub me wrong because I think right now Syracuse has got to be in the portal and looking at a couple different positions and fulfilling their voids, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's one of two, right? Like it really sucks that Trevor's walking out the door, but you wish him the best of luck, and now you have an opportunity to maybe utilize what you're going to pay him in NIL money to go entice somebody else from a different school to fill one of your voids. If you feel strong at the wide receiver position, which I think they are, right? Like Justice Ross Simmons played extremely well throughout the spring. You've got a couple guys that are running track right now that may have not been able to give their all on that spring football side. I think the future is bright at the wide receiver position. Now you have to start to play that roster game. You're looking at the depth chart going, okay, who's this, who's that, where can we plug this, where can we plug that? And now you're going to allocate those funds, just like you would in free agency for the NFL. You're going to allocate those funds to somebody else and hopefully fill some of those holes.
What's your sense of the roster right now? I mean, obviously we didn't get to unfortunately see Ricky Collins at the spring game on Saturday. Now we know Trevor's out. We know Michael Johnson will be heading to the portal as a backup depth piece at quarterback. But where do you feel the roster is right now? Having lost so much of that veteran experience we knew from last year.
Yeah, the roster looks pretty good. I think there's a couple holes that you need to fill. Offensive line, you're always looking for more depth. The opportunity to, maybe plug in a linebacker in certain situations. But, this is kind of that first blush. You get to watch them play a little bit. But, for the most part, I think you've created more depth than you've ever had at Syracuse probably within the last 15 to 20 years. You're going out and for all prognosticating circumstances, you're looking at a 2026 recruiting class that looks pretty good, right? And, those are starting to fill in there. So I think for the most part, you flip the roster, you won a lot of games via the portal. Everybody now realizes you have to continue to develop talent because talent leaves, right? It's no different than drafting a player and then hitting on a jackpot in free agency. So you just have to continue to build on those different things. But for the most part, you like what Syracuse has. You know, you would have liked to seen Ricky Collins out there flinging around for that game, but he wasn't. And it was a great evaluation period for Michael Johnson Jr., who it seems like he's going to enter the portal, and then and Williams as well as the quarterback position. So I like what they have. The biggest advantage in my eyes is the retention of the staff, majority of the staff. Mm-hmm. And that's where you can continue to build inroads in recruiting, one, but also making sure that the system continues to build. So those are my biggest takeaways.
You know, especially on the offensive side of the staff, right? Like, obviously bringing in McCord last year and him working with Nixon and all those offensive coaches, that really helped smooth out what the new coaching staff was doing. But when you have Jeff Nixon back, and he got sniffs at the professional level, when you have Nunzio Campanelli back, same deal. And I know Michael Johnson's in the portal, but his dad's still here. He was an integral part of the offensive coaching staff. How much does that, do you think, help, Adam, this offseason, getting a Ricky Collins and these young wide receivers, young running backs up to speed on offense?
Huge, right? Like, the wisdom that they're going to pass down is tremendous to everybody, because you did get younger, so you're lacking a little bit of that veteran leadership in some of the rooms, and that's now going to have to be, until they develop those guys, it's going to have to rely on the coaches and making sure that they're prepared, and you're going over some things that you may have taken for granted in certain positions, like having Aranda and Max Mang, like those guys, you really didn't have to do much more to. Yeah, you still got to coach them and hold them accountable, but you're going to get pretty green at that tight end position. The quarterback position is one that, now it's another project for Nunzio Campanelli to take and develop. And you're going to see a little bit difference in the offense. I think you're going to see a little bit more RPO, quarterback on the run, throwing the football. But overall, I think the position that you continue to look at, it takes time. It takes 2 to 3 recruiting classes and portal classes, and that's to develop that offensive line. And I think overall, Dale Williams has done a very tremendous job of getting not necessarily his guys, and making them a offensive line that went out and performed pretty well. And towards the end of the season, they looked very good.
Yeah, I look at the group. Obviously, that group has changed over a ton from last year. And, you put a picture out on the gram after the game on Saturday. It was you and Justin Pugh was up with you guys, with Matt and your son. And, there's 15, 20 years of NFL offensive line experience standing next to each other. Then you look down at the field. It's the first time in a long time, right, size-wise, it looks right, huh? Like, who knows? I mean, they're young guys, how fast they can contribute. But the offensive line get-off-the-bus group looks a lot better than it has in a while.
Yeah, definitely getting off the bus group is you can't win a game walking off the bus, but you can definitely lay the fear of God into some when you walk off the bus. And you look at a kid like Byron Washington, and is he where he wants to be? Is he where they want him to be? No, right? Like, I think he's still learning how to be, I almost said a pro, but in this world, sometimes you are a pro in college. But learning how to take care of his body and develop, and he's just a large human being that it's going to take a little bit of time for him to progress at this level, but you might be able to stick him at their guard position. Some of these younger guys, you might be able to cover up initially, give them some experience, and then bump them out to that tackle, right? Like, as I'm going through recruiting with my son, like, the tackle position is one of the hardest positions for, one, to project, but two, also to develop over a period of time. And the good ones don't last very long because they're either jackpotting and going to a different team, or they're moving on to the NFL ranks. So I think that you've got a bunch of young guys in there that are hungry. Mac playing the left tackle position, you've got some years for him to develop. So overall, it's a tough go, but I think how Syracuse has navigated this landscape of NIL, transfer portal, recruiting, they're on top of it, and they're one of the best in the country right now of going out and finding talent young and then continuing to talk through them throughout that process.
You mentioned Dale Williams, Adam, as Adam Terry's with us. He's the offensive line coach. He had his, post-practice media scrum deal a week ago, maybe. And I found this interesting, and you tell me if it is interesting or not, but he says, what do they have, 17, 18 linemen? He takes them all and not only ranks them like 1 through 18, 1 through 20, he tells them exactly what their rank is on the offensive line. Like, there's no guessing when it comes to playing for this guy. I find it fascinating, and, man, it feels like a breath of fresh air, right? Like, you know exactly where you stand when it comes to playing O-line for Syracuse right now.
And that's the way it should be, right? Like, you don't want to get into a job and not know where you stand or not know what you're supposed to do throughout the day or, what the KPIs are. So, when somebody walks into that offensive line room, Dale Williams has been around a long time, and he's a very good ball coach. This is the caveat here. When you got a good O-line coach when they're on the cool, COOL, Mushroom Society giving a presentation. So this is that dark back room where offensive line coach are giving their own presentations. But I'm looking forward to watching one of his, and that's like guys like Jim McNally and old school guys, Paul Alexander, that they like what you're doing, so they're going to bring it to the forefront and give it to some of the younger offensive line coaches. So Dale's presenting. I'm looking forward to that. But ranking somebody 1 through 18, you love to see that, because if you're number 18, you don't want to be there, and if you're number 1, you want to stay there. Everything else in between, you're fighting your butt off in order to try to be number 1.
I'm not up on the cool Mushroom Society. All right, that feels like some sort of. All right, that's like an inner sanctum.
We got a secret handshake. It's been around for like 30 years, but it's kind of one of those that. You're never going to a convention and really hunkering down to listen to O-line coaches talk, but they're, we're kind of big, we're kind of, gregarious, and a lot of us have to have overcome our looks by the ability to tell jokes.
I don't know if I meet the height and weight requirements to get into the Cool Mushroom Society, but we'll see what the application process is like. All right, Adam, I want to hit you with some of the NFL draft stuff. We're a week out from the draft. We got eyes on McCord, we got eyes on Aronde and LeQuint and this whole group. What's popping to you as far as what you're hearing about the Syracuse guys next week?
A deep class coming out of Syracuse. They're well respected. They hold all the intangibles for those position groups that are necessary. When you're looking at a guy like Kyle McCord, he has got every throw. Now it's, can he plug into your system? Right. So the good head coaches know what their system is with their quarterbacks and how they're going to develop them. And you see that historically, right? Like they find a guy, they latch on to him. I view him as a second day, second, third round pick somewhere in there. And, I think maybe you go down and you supplant a guy in New York and you go play for the Giants. Like, I think that's a decent fit. But then there's also these other ones out there right now. Like, could he play out in San Francisco? Are they going to do something like that? Bring in somebody. You look at the Rams. There's just a multitude of different teams that you may not expect that might be looking for somebody to develop and then plug in within a year or two. So you like that. And then LeQuint Allen, just a tremendous team player, very violent, very physical in the pass game, which is one that these pro scouts are looking for. Can they pass protect? Okay, if they can pass protect, can they catch the ball out of the backfield? Those are the two things that hopefully you can be a good running back, right? Hopefully when you get the ball, you're tremendous at that. But those are the two intangibles that a lot of people are looking at and saying, okay, can they do these other things? And while they develop, can they play special teams? So, I'm just very high on LeQuint and what he's capable of doing. And then Rondé Gadsden's kind of this sleeper to me where you're sitting there and saying, like, he's got everything. It's just who loves him, right? Do they love him as an inline blocker? Probably not. Is he going to develop and get better at that? 100%. Do you love him as that big slot receiver? By all means, you do. Standing up, capping the end of the line of scrimmage, running routes, yeah, no, very good. But it's just who falls in love with that, like who's looking for that position this year. So I think Arande brings a lot of character, a lot of moxie, having the dad being an ex-pro guy, understands what he's getting into, and you just wish him all the best. And then you hop onto the other side of the ball, and Fidel Diggs, I talked about him on a Giants podcast, and I described him as selfless. That's how I first started off and said, he's definitely in that selfless nature because he was a Swiss Army knife for that defense and Elijah Robinson, playing with his hand down, moving back to linebacker position, doing whatever was necessary in order to help that team progress. He was a captain at Texas A&M. He comes over to Syracuse, and you see that leadership capability. So the guys that are really, those are the guys that you're looking at. Cinco Clark, has that potential as a thumper, and really, I see him, his first year or two locking the roster position up by playing special teams and then getting the ability to develop in a system. And are any of these guys day one starters? I'm not sure about that. And if I say either way, hopefully it's just that nature of once you get into camp and once you have that expectation of what is required of you, then you can start to prove that. And I think all of these guys have that mentality. I'm going to prove you wrong, and looking forward to it, right? Like, hearing names called out of Syracuse, there was a big drought. Now there's probably multiple guys that could supplant that 2001 draft class that, or 2018, right? Was it 2018 that had the most in recent years?
Yeah, well, depending on how many there are, I think it's like the most sense. It's either 2018 or back when you were playing. I mean, it's been a while. It's been a while since there have been 4, 5, 6 guys picked.
Well, if we're going back that far, it's been a long time, and they really turned the program around and brought the spotlight back to Syracuse. I think you can see how the program flipped its roster, had a couple guys stay. I'm forgetting Marlo Wax, right? Like, that's a guy that could he be drafted? Yeah, sure, right? Like, he's that later round guy that has all the intangibles to play, or could he be a guy like Zaire Franklin who, picks and chooses where he wants to go and has the ability to then prove himself, and look what he's doing out in Indianapolis.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of these guys have that Zaire willing to do anything trait, which is, you're trying to make one of those last spots on a NFL roster. It's absolutely huge. All right, last thing for you, Adam. One of your old teammates, both in college and the pros, is back in the fold here, and Dwight Freeny. Fran has hired him to some kind of role here. What do you make of Dwight being back around, at least in some context right now?
Phenomenal, right? Like, I think, there was a huge disconnect in the Dino Babers era of older guys coming back, right? Like, I'm not young in the tooth anymore. It's not like I played 3 to 4 years ago. I think I've hit over about 20 years ago was the last time I strapped on an orange helmet. But to bring a guy back like Dwight Freeny, you tip your cap to Fran Brown because he understands that there's a certain level of what coaches can do, and then some of the guys need to pick the brain of a Hall of Famer and have the ability to dream, right? Like, if you want to be a Hall of Famer, Dwight can give you every rundown, lowdown of what it took to stay there. The on-the-field stuff, the off-the-field stuff, and I think it's a tremendous hire. What the level of it is, I don't know, right? Like, we got the press release just like you guys did, and you're starting to see this have the ability to rely on former guys to give some insight, and also, hey, man, this is how it is. It's not this way. This is the way that it is up here, and this is how we're going to do it. These are the people that you can rely on. And it's a tremendous resource for a lot of these guys to now tap into his network, right? Like, Dwight Freeny's network is much bigger than a guy who was a walk-on here, right? Like, the Hall of Fame status, the rooms that he's been in, the people he's talked to, the players that will pick up his phone call or return a text, that is the part that you can't put a price to.
And I know this, Adam. If people start doing spin moves on their pass rush this year, well, we know exactly where to, to credit that to. If we see King Joseph Edwards or something spinning around in circles. All right, man. Always great to chat. Thanks for the updates. I'm sure we'll catch up again soon. Okay.
All right, sounds good.